Ryan Ruff, and it's great to be back with everyone today. As always, I have our star of the show in Homer Smith, private wealth advisor, joining us today. We're going to be diving into a very big wealth management discussion, as we typically do on this show, to kind of frame up today's conversation. Like many of us, some of the wealthiest people in our country often worry about three things, right? Their health, their families, and their finances. So today, Homer and I are going to take a deep look into the practices, those best practices of some of the super rich, as you may have heard us call them on the show. And we're going to look at some of the strategies that they utilize to, yes, address their fears and then make sure they stay on the right track to avoid those fears becoming a reality. So with that being said, let's go ahead and bring Homer aboard. Homer, it's good to see you today. How you doing?
Hey Ryan, good to see you as always.
Yeah, good to be with you, Homer. We're talking about these big fears today that are they really worry the extremely affluent people out there that have a considerable amount of resources at their disposal. And I would imagine that today's discussion is going to be kind of a good reminder that look, even great wealth doesn't eliminate some of those fundamental challenges that we face in life. Correct?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's easy to think about that just because you have all this wealth, they shouldn't have concerns or fears around money. But that just really isn't the case. And clearly, from the conversation we're going to have today, I think there's a few areas that we see across all of our clients and the wealthy people that we speak to, where these are pretty common across them and really across all wealth levels for that matter.
So we're going to unpack a few of these different fears today, Homer. Why don't you walk us through them, and we'll start with the first one. What do you got for us?
Well, I think at a high level, kind of going back to that idea that just because you have all of this wealth, and obviously it's better to have wealth, right? I mean, having all this wealth provides lots of freedoms, options that you wouldn't have outside of that. But just having that wealth doesn't mean that you don't have these frictions and issues that come up. And so the three areas that we see most commonly being those fears, and again, these are pretty common across all groups, but first and foremost is they worry about their health. And some severe issue that might come up for themselves or someone else in their family that could create obviously some financial challenges. Another area that they focus on a lot around their fears, and they're living it, quite often, is some dysfunctional family member doing substantial damage to the family. And then finally, they worry about losing their wealth that they currently possess. So it's health, it's challenges with family members, and it's just losing that wealth in general. And so again, obviously, they don't have a monopoly on these issues. People of all wealth levels have a lot of these same issues. Um, but the one advantage that the wealthy have is they have that wealth that can bring creative solutions to the table to help deal with some of these. And so while you can't have a stress-free life, you can make really smart decisions on how to address some of these issues, and that's what we'll focus on throughout today. So it's those are the three issues that we'll start with.
All right. Well, yeah. Let's bat lead off with that first one and talking about just health. And so, talk to us about this challenge. I mean, yes, we all think about our health. We want to make sure that we're living a healthy lifestyle so that we can see a level of longevity in our lives. But where does wealth enter the picture when we're talking about health and as an overall fear?
Yeah, so I think it's to start. I like to think about the saying that when you have your health, you have hundreds of problems. When you don't have your health, you have one. And so, severe health concerns, for you and the people you care about the most, are going to be distracting, both emotionally, physically, and often financially. And so, this is going to be a top priority, obviously, of the wealthy, just like it would be for anyone else. And I think, the pandemic that we experienced a few years ago, really has focused a lot of people's energy on how do we stick around for a lot longer? What are some of the things we can be doing proactively to do that? So there's no real assured defense against a lot of these issues. Anyone can get heart disease, anybody can get cancer. Genetics and just bad luck can be a counterbalance to the wealth that you have. But with that said, having that wealth really does put you in a position to put things in a place that can mitigate some of this and be better equipped to deal with these issues as they arise.
Sure, sure. So, in terms of dealing with it, when you are, when you do have that level of wealth, what are we seeing some of those affluent or even super rich individuals doing to address these health related concerns and challenges when they pop up?
Yeah, the most common one we're seeing, we see it with our clients in our practice, is that they're joining concierge medical practices and concierge medical groups. And really, at their core, concierge medical groups, it's a membership model. You pay a fee to get access to a boutique set of medical services where some of the biggest benefits are the ratio of physicians to patients is relatively small. One of the key issues that successful business owners and families deal with is time. One of the most critical factors to getting through a medical issue is time and how quickly you're seen, how quickly it's addressed. And so these concierge medical groups provide more quicker access, longer visits. And oftentimes, the leaders of these concierge medical practices have greater expertise than your typical care provider. So they often have a lot of technology enabled too. So you get telemedicine with your physician, and a lot of other technology able enhancements, especially for those who travel the world. So I would say of all of the things that I see the wealthy families doing, getting access to concierge medicine is number one. The second one that's becoming a lot more popular is this idea of longevity planning. And so, as we're living longer, it's one thing to live longer and live those last 10 years ill and sick and not living a well rounded life. It's another thing to be proactive early enough in your life to identify what are the things that could come up and address those in your health now that could allow you to live not just a healthy life or a longer life, but a healthier, longer life where you're still, active and enjoying life along the way. And so, again, being able to utilize things like genome sequencing, more regular proactive blood testing to identify issues before they come up, and then even more experimental treatment like stem cell therapy and others. So these are the things that we see on the health side. You know, access to through concierge medicine to more proactive planning there, and then more proactive planning just around longevity for
Mhm.
themselves.
Yeah, and folks, Homer and I had double clicked deeper into this discussion surrounding longevity planning in a prior episode on the show. So if that is a topic that really interests you, I'd recommend traveling back and checking that episode out. But Homer, the second big fear that you mentioned is an interesting one, and we've talked about family dynamics a lot on this show and how they really factor into different wealth discussions that a family would have with each other. But specifically, this fear that we're talking about today is this idea of maybe dysfunctional family members doing damage. And that damage can be a broad term in different ways, shapes, and forms to the family. So, why don't you explain a little bit more what it is you mean by damage here and what types can really occur and what that ripple effect looks like?
Uh, just like the health saying, there's another saying that you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. And this makes me. Just had a client conversation just in the last week with a successful family, and we were talking to the matriarch of the family, and it's like I love all three of my kids, but I don't like them right now. And it's around some of these issues where there's a lot of entitlement that can come up when it comes to wealthy families, and uh, that can lead to a lot of these issues. But the reality is, it's not just wealthy families that deal with conflicts, codependencies, where other members of the family are drains on the family resources. But when there's wealth involved, the conflicts and the issues can be magnified quite a bit. And what we often see is, we also say if you have three kids, probably one of them is going to be a bad seed. And that bad seed is someone who's going to exploit other family members, cause issues within the family business, and they're typically a major distraction and have issues with causing trouble with family harmony, and also can destroy prospects for future wealth. And then other cases, these, like I mentioned earlier, these kids are just entitled. Um, and self-absorbed, and they've always been able to kind of get away with things, and they put themselves in positions where they're constantly in jams, getting arrested, subjects of lawsuits. And while the idea would be, hey, tough love and let them have to deal with some of this stuff, what we more often see is these families, because they have the resources, they're able to solve these problems quickly and get their kids out of these issues. And so that's
Mhm.
something that we often see coming up when it comes to this type of a distraction, the family planning issues.
Yeah. So in those events, Homer, what kind of steps could we what well rather what steps do we see the very wealthy folks taking to kind of mitigate some of those issues around dysfunctional families that our audience could learn a thing or two from?
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes these situations even more complicated is because these families have the resources and are able to like bail these kids out of these disruptive situations. Um, it often can give the wrong message, that they're subject to different rules than everybody else, and so it actually can make the problems even worse when they're constantly solving all these problems for them. And so, we see families trying to solve this as best they can in a few different ways. I mean, first, from a financial side, and they put structures in place, things like trusts that have lots of rules and oversight, so that either while they're alive and have access to the trust, or when mom and dad are passed away and they receive their inheritance, there's things in place to provide rules for how they access the funds, so they can't get access to too much at once. um, and also that structure provides more protection from creditors that they might be creating in the future as well. Now, trusts are very particular to an individual situation, but this is something that can be put together for each family. Another big issue we see is business succession planning, where there's one family member or two that are in the business and one or more that are not. And one or more that are not can often be disruptive to the family business. And so, structuring the succession planning of the business to ensure that those family members that are still in the business have the ability to run the business without the distraction of the other family members. And then on the personal side, they have access to resources so that they can bring in crisis management and behavioral experts when needed to try to mitigate some of the issues. But the really forward thinking families are trying to do this proactively before those issues come up, where they're starting to see maybe some communication issues bubble up, some family harmony issues bubble up, and they bring in resources to help kind of bridge some of these generational issues, where they're bringing better communication between all of the family members and trying to address some of those issues before they become something major.
Sure, sure. And when they become major, obviously there's a whirlwind of issues that then can creep into play. But Homer, let's jump now over to that third big fear that you mentioned earlier, which is that idea of losing your wealth. Of course, regardless of your level of wealth, anybody can worry about losing their wealth. But talk to me a little bit more about how, yes, this is in fact a fear of even the extremely affluent or the super rich, as we mentioned on this show. Why is this a fear even for them as well?
And 100%, Ryan. I think uh, the higher you go, the farther you can fall. I mean, when we talked about some of the business succession planning issues in previous episodes, we have this idea of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in three generations, and it is a big fear that you've created all this wealth. And that there are things that are going to come and take it away, whether it's just poor decision making, poor investment markets, poor economy. There's all sorts of things. And if you have the other fears as well, if you're fearful of your health, or potential family disharmony issues that could contribute to that wealth going away, there's a number of reasons that they have that. And then outside of that, there's a whole number of groups out there, criminal groups that target wealthy families, whether it's targeting their houses and preying on them, whether it's being financial predators and trying to manipulate them into giving them access to their wealth. And increasingly, we're seeing cyber criminals getting looking for weaknesses and trying to gain access to the wealth on the cyber side. So plenty of reasons for them to be fearful out there.
Sure. So, I mean, this is a deep seated fear among so many people, Homer. Any recommendations on this side for how we can combat this fear? Because this is a big one.
Yeah, I think some of the key issues that they can address, and how they can address these fears. First, having the right professional team. That it's crucial to work with a group that's got integrity and proven transparency, so that the people you're working with are reliable. And it's hard when you get to that wealth level to be able to discern that. And so we found is the best way to find those professionals is a referral from a trusted peer, or especially from a trusted other professional you work with, like your CPA or attorney. Another area, and this is an area we do a lot of work with our clients on, is implementing asset protection strategies. This could be as simple as just making sure you have the correct amount of umbrella insurance, which really helps discourage others from attempting frivolous lawsuits and similar attacks, to much more complex structures that you can put into place that really creates a moat around your wealth and makes it very difficult to get access to it. And then an area that unfortunately we're having to spend more time talking to clients about is really shoring up more of the physical protection. So, adding in more complex security and monitoring systems, and adding more technology around sensors and infrared cameras. And I wish that wasn't the case, but really is becoming more and more important for our wealthy families to really secure their physical situation as well.
Yeah, Homer, there's a lot of information we've thrown at our audience today. If you could bottom line it for our audience today, what would be some of the key takeaways that they should leave this episode with, especially if those folks out there are, are not among those extremely wealthy individuals or consider themselves, that level of influence?
Yeah, I think the good news, Ryan, and really a lot of the work that we do for even our very wealthy clients is trying to take the best ideas of the billionaires that they've been, working on and spending money on creating for years and years, and how do we bring this to, pretty much everybody? And good news for things like concierge medicine, there's becoming increasingly more options. Regardless of what your wealth level is, to access concierge medicine on a local or international basis. From a financial professional standpoint, the good news is there's a lot of high caliber professionals that cater to a wide array of wealth levels. So there's some that cater strictly to super wealthy, and there's others that cater to emerging and younger families as well. And there's a lot of asset protection tools where you don't need to have massive amounts of wealth that you can implement that can provide a lot of protection at a very low cost. So I think the good news at all of these levels, there's definitely things that can be put into place, and just as your wealth increases, the more complexity that typically comes with some of these solutions.
So, Homer, look, you have a lot of these types of conversations around one of these big three fears on a regular basis with folks. Again, those fears, the health side of things, maybe family dysfunction, and then of course the idea of protecting your wealth overall from, losing it. If anybody out there in our audience, let's say one of those fears really resonates them with them right now, and let's say they're interested in maybe opening up a conversation surrounding one of those, if not all of them, what would be the best way somebody could, like I said, just open up a dialogue with you and your team to just see what maybe what strategies they're missing to help them mitigate those fears?
Yeah, the easiest way is always to just reach out via email or go to our website, and we'll have all of that up on the screen for the episode. But um, I think what's important about all this is even just having a conversation about it, but especially if we get into the planning for how to solve it. Why that's so important is there is so much noise out there today. With everything going on politically, socially, economically, it's very easy to get distracted by these fears and so much else that's going on. And really, our role for our clients is to quiet that noise and really address these fears and these issues so you can really focus on what's most important to you, and really living this amazing life of significance and getting past some of these fears and living your greatest life. So, it really it makes sense to reach out, whether it's us or somebody else you trust, to help you get through these issues so you can get beyond them and focus on what's most important.
Fantastic. Well, Homer, I really appreciate your time today. I know you got a lot of clients to serve, so we'll let you get back to doing that. But looking forward to jumping on the next one with you.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Good to see you.
All righty, I appreciate it, Homer. And hey, look, folks, we want to take one final moment, as always, and say thank you for stopping by and spending some time with us on the podcast today. If you did take something away from today's discussion surrounding these three big fears, you learned a thing or two, well, go ahead and hit that subscribe button then on whichever platform you check this out on. That way, you never miss out on a future conversation between Homer, myself, or maybe one of our esteemed guests, where we dive into these different wealth management topics so that you and yours could come out better for it on the other end. Before Homer, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long today, but we appreciate you stopping by and being with us on Advance Your Wealth.